1996, Kansas City, Kansas, ranked first out of 24 first-class cities in mill levy, first not being the best. Now, after the most recent 2 mil decrease, we are 13th out of 25. That's a great improvement that we ought to be proud of. At the same time, Wyandotte County, the county mill levy, at one point we were 78th, and now we're down to 95th. So as we've been able to reduce the mill rate, we've also had to compensate for a loss of revenues from the state. You know, the machinery and equipment funding that the state used to send back to the cities and the counties was phased out. That was an attempt at the state level to retain Boeing in Wichita, and in order to keep Boeing, they gave up all that machinery and equipment. That was significant annual revenues to the city, and over that period of time, it has put a great burden on us. And then, of course, in 2008, with the Great Recession, sales tax suffered. Of course, property values began to decline, and we made significant budget cuts during that time. And we also compensated by increasing the BPU pilot. And so, whereas the BPU in 1997 was at the pilot was 5.9%, it ratcheted up to 12.8, and it still remains at 11.9. And that's a significant burden on our residents, and we know that. And of course, we know that those revenues are being used for necessary services to provide quality of life for our residents, but it still is a burden, and we have to be aware of that. With that, at least the perception over time, you know, this is the population change for Kansas City, Kansas over the decades. We tapped out at 186,845, that's Wyandotte County population. We tapped out in 1970 at that point. And then there was a precipitous decline over the next 4 decades until 2010, when it leveled off and we began an increase. We began to grow again. Now, having grown up in Kansas City, Kansas during that period, you know, it was constant complaints about, you know, crime, blight, you know, decay of our neighborhoods, of course, taxes, and that was the reason why we lost so much population. The experience of people living in the city, in the county, was that the county and the city was on the decline. And when people perceive that their future is tied to a place that's declining, they make other choices. What that has left us with is a tremendous amount of vacant parcels in Kansas City, Kansas neighborhoods. We have hollowed out a large portion of our tax base. So this map shows that north of I-70, those places in yellow are vacant parcels. And those on the right is the south of I-70 vacant parcels. 7,400 vacant parcels with no structure, and that's a total of 1,611 acres east of 635. A way to look at this, what are the effects of this? As you lose population, as you develop vacancies, it has it's a growing effect. Vacant homes, presence of a vacant home decreases the value of homes within 500 feet by 2.1%. No matter how good the other homes are in the neighborhood, if you have a vacant home, any house within, on average, is going to be assessed at 2.1% less. We have 36,000 parcels within 500 feet of a vacant structure. That's a 51, if we apply that 2.1% to those 36,000, that's about a $51 million reduction in appraised value, and that's $450,000 in tax revenue that is missed every year. Now, if we begin to take on the problem and actually remediate the vacant structures, you will see some improvements. Addressing blight actually reduces violent crime. Now, this was taken from a study done in Philadelphia in the American Journal of Public Health. It simply says this: a growing body of research showing abandoned building remediation significantly reduces firearm violence and it's cost effective. There's a 39% reduction in gun violence in and around remediated abandoned buildings, and there's a 5% reduction around remediated lots. So bringing the kind of attention that we know we need to bring to our older neighborhoods, we're going to see an improvement in should see an improvement in crime statistics and an improvement in our revenues. Another way to look at this, obviously, simple treatments of abandoned buildings and vacant lots returned conservative estimates of between $5 and $26 in net benefits to taxpayers. Those are net benefits after the investment in improving the lot or improving the house, the structure, and it's a $79 to $333 improvement to society at large for every dollar invested. Companies would kill for that kind of return on investment. This is important because if we look forward to financially where we can expect to be over the next several years, we recognize there's a $500 million funding gap over the next 10 years. Based upon what we know we have to fund or expected to fund and what we can anticipate, how we can anticipate to grow revenues based upon what we're currently doing, we're looking at a $500 million funding gap. It's no surprise when we get together for our budgets that we are fighting over very few dollars. They're just not there. If you look at the green bar there, if we assume in the $94 million their operating revenue increment, that's assuming a 3% improvement in revenues each year based upon our experience over a decade or two of assessed value, improvement in assessed value. That's $94 million. And we would, if we continue to fund at $15 million per year capital bonds, we'll have $244 million in additional proceeds to fund, but that doesn't cover it. So clearly this didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over a year, it didn't happen over a decade. It is the result of 40 years of population decline, of blight, of tax delinquency. We're not going to get out of this overnight. This is a long-term play we have to look at, but we have to be clear about what's the situation, what's our predicament here. And this just represents graphically what our funding gap will be, and that gap gets wider each year. So what is the long-term play? Well, I think it's really what it has always been to try and move this. It's simply to do our job better, and that is to fulfill the mission. Our mission is to improve the quality of life of citizens. And what does that look like? The quality of life of citizens is most directly impacted by the quality of neighborhood-based services. So I just want to make a comment. These slides through here are taken from the Neighborhood-centric city, which was a white paper commissioned by IBM. And their approach is this, that local governments have revenue collection bureaus or offices. They don't often have revenue enhancement offices. Now, we can enhance our revenues by raising taxes. But to take a look at it and say, well, if we are saying that we're in the real estate business, that's where most of our revenues come from, through property taxes, what strategies do we need to adopt to grow the values of our properties? What are those things that will actually cause an increase in property values, attract new residents, sustain new businesses or the businesses we have to generate more revenues? What is that? And it's simply this: if we fulfill our mission and improve the quality of life of citizens, it will happen. The quality of life of citizens is most directly impacted by the quality of neighborhood-based services. Again, I go back to this point that we experience our city primarily through our neighborhood, what our experience in our neighborhood is. Now, the most effective metric by which to measure this performance is change in property values. You know, in this most recent round of evaluations by the appraiser, the concern is, well, my property taxes went up. Yes, we reduced the mill levy. Yeah, but my property taxes went up. And the short answer is because the value of your property went up. That's a good thing. We need our property values to increase in value. We've seen enough of what happens the other way. We have to find ways to increase the value of our properties. So for us, as we try to, as we move through our next budget session, and we've got to, and as projects come forward, we have to look at it in this way. Our public investments in capital and services should be assessed based on the direct impact they will have on property values. If our primary way to enhance our revenues, other than raising taxes, is to improve property values, then we have to look at our expenditures to evaluate how do they improve property values. What are those things we're going to expend upon that is going to improve the quality of life and therefore drive up demand for people to live in our neighborhoods? And we'll have to use this as an assessment. This is where the hard decisions have to be made. Where do we invest? How do we invest to grow our tax base? What investment, what kind of investment, which investment will in fact yield the best return on investment? It simply gets down to a matter of opportunity cost. If we expend $5 million in investment in one project, that $5 million could be allocated many other places. How do we evaluate which one of those is actually going to improve property values the most? The difficulty is, like any business, we have limited resources. We can't go out and put ourselves up on the stock exchange and see if we can bring in capital. We have to borrow this money or raise taxes to cash flow it, but we have to evaluate one project in one neighborhood over and against other projects in other neighborhoods. That's the tough part. But it doesn't happen by chance. It happens because we intend it. We evaluate it. And we make the strategic decisions we need to improve our values. So simply this: when we direct our resources where they achieve their highest returns in property values, that will not only help local governments advance their core mission of improving the quality of life of citizens, but it will also secure the fiscal health of the local government. So we know neighborhoods are the fabric of our community. You know, when you look back over the last 40 years and you talk to, you know, when you go to the neighborhood meetings and you talk to folks who've been active in their neighborhoods for decades, doing that hard work of mowing the lots that were vacant for so long because residents couldn't stand to see them unmowed, or picking up the trash in their neighborhoods, helping out a neighbor who can't afford to fix their porch, those kinds of things, taking on the real problems of crime, trying to demand from us, from the city, more help. We have 81 neighborhood groups and 8 NBRs. This is their focus. This is their passion. And this commission, and the council before, has responded to that. We've tried to strengthen our neighborhood groups. We've established new neighborhood business revitalization groups. We provide staffing for this. We have more recently adopted the SOAR program and funded the SOAR program, which carries on some of these same strategies. It's what the neighbors have been doing and what this commission has been doing to try and address these problems. The goals for SOAR of reducing blight, increasing safety and the perception of safety, of course, improving customer service and communication between the unified government and residents, and then increased community cohesion. And with all these strategies, think about what we've expended for property maintenance, cutting those lots much more regularly, being much more conscientious about boarding up vacant structures, trying to get them into land banks so they can get rehabbed, so these will come back on the tax rolls. Or if they can't be saved, not letting them sit out there for a year or longer, trying to get them on the demolition list and get them taken down, and then cutting the grass. Those kinds of things we've been doing consistently. So we're on the right track. We're doing the right things. Same with the neighborhood revitalization strategic area, the 5-year plan. And this neighborhood was identified as a tipping point neighborhood. In other words, it's a neighborhood that if left alone and just kind of left to progress as it seemed to be progressing, it would tip towards blight. It would tip towards more tax delinquencies, fewer residents, therefore fewer businesses, fewer kids in our schools. But the NERSA has simply said, wait a minute, we can take an explicitly, intentionally neighborhood-centered approach to this. We can engage our residents in helping them identify and resolve the issues, the quality of life issues in their neighborhoods, so that with that additional attention, we are communicating to the neighbors that this neighborhood is important to you, therefore it's important to us. We want to bring additional resources to help this neighborhood not only survive, but to grow again, to move away from the tendency towards blight, delinquency, vacancy, crime, to a place that not only retains residents, but attracts residents. It's a place where raising a family, the children might want to come and live nearby, and the grandchildren. Because frankly, that was the way neighborhoods developed before World War II. So from our neighborhoods up, it's simply an initiative which, insofar as it is successful, it's going to be more fruitful in improving the quality of life of our citizens and growing our tax base. And there are, I'm going to say, new ways of looking at this, new ways of describing the problems, new tools for collecting and analyzing data, for graphically presenting that data in a way that is easily grasped and moves people to action. There are ways to evaluate the return on investment for our capital investments and our services. These are national thought leaders from Strong Towns, from the Incremental Development Alliance, from Urban 3 Consulting. So earlier in the year, the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library hosted a series of presentations on neighborhood-centric approach and traditional neighborhood development. And so Chuck Marone from Strong Towns and Monty Anderson from the Incremental Development Alliance and Joe Minicozy from Urban 3 Consulting all presented. And really what they're saying is, if you look at neighborhoods since World War II, with the car becoming available and people spreading out, what that does is it creates neighborhoods that require a tremendous amount of infrastructure for relatively fewer residents. Lots got bigger, many more cul-de-sacs. You still have to run the same infrastructure. You still have to provide a level of service for police and fire and ambulance, not to mention repairing the roads. And so when the developer comes in and does a suburban development, they put that infrastructure in, but then they hand it over to us. And as that stuff begins to wear out and need replacement or repair, oftentimes, usually in fact, the tax revenues generated on those properties actually do not sustain the cost of repairing that infrastructure. It's an imbalance. And what happens is communities will build a neighborhood, fully developed. We assume the cost of that infrastructure, and over time, we have to keep putting the money in to care for that infrastructure, and another development will come on. And there was a flood of revenues to cover those, but eventually that wears out. And so over time, you get this imbalance of trying to sustain infrastructure for relatively fewer residents and therefore fewer tax revenues. The traditional way of neighborhoods developed in the United States, even before World War II, but really throughout history, as Chuck Marone explains, is the incremental development. Minnesota Avenue began probably as a few houses and a few shops, wooden structures, that as time went on, those were replaced by maybe a two-story brick structure. And eventually that would move further west down Minnesota Avenue. And then other more intensive uses came into play here, a six-story building perhaps. And so that density with relatively smaller infrastructure costs generated more revenues than the cost to the city. So what we have to do is we have this opportunity, that we show how much vacant structures and underutilized structures we have in neighborhoods that are hollowed out. Actually, we need to look at that as our opportunity. Those areas that have lost homes and buildings still have the infrastructure intact generally. We don't have to go in and install new water lines generally, or new power lines, or sewer lines. There might be some repairs. We also already have fire coverage and police coverage for those neighborhoods. So at no greater additional cost to us, we can realize greater revenues if we can bring the kind of improvements we need to in those areas to develop that density again. Some of these tools that Minicozy and the Incremental Development Alliance bring give us an opportunity to evaluate projects, a development project. So when we do a TIF, or we do a CID, or any kind of subsidy, there are ways in which you can evaluate these to see what the return on investment brings. Because as we know, some developments can actually harm our fiscal position. And there's a way to evaluate those to see, in fact, if we do this project, will it enhance our fiscal position, or will actually, delete from it? So, to take this neighborhood-centric strategy, and again, we're looking at our traditional neighborhoods. We have so many viable areas in our traditional neighborhoods that we have to take a closer look at. And for this From our Neighborhoods Up initiative, we've identified a neighborhood right downtown that we want to bring incremental improvements to. We want to apply some methods and some improvements and try and take baseline data and then measure the improvements. What will that look like? We look at the different measures we're trying to examine. Amenities. What do we need to bring? Grocery store. We want to improve walkability. What do we do for our parks, our green space? Public events, beautification, litter abatement. Think about this. When you get off of I-70 onto 5th Street, and the amount of litter right there as you get off the exit has got to send a signal to people coming to town, someone doesn't care here. And whether that's KDOT's responsibility or our responsibility, the bottom line is that trash is heavy on the side of the road. That's not a good message. We don't want people telling that story. We have basic services that we can look at. Security, lighting, improving the lighting, sidewalks, security cameras, perhaps, along our commercial corridors. Why? So that people will feel comfortable at 5 o'clock on a winter evening, perhaps walking to a place to get something to eat, or to have a beer, or to go to the grocery store. We have tremendous needs and resources as we move forward here. I'm going to highlight especially neighborhood leadership. We have very powerful neighborhood groups already active in these areas, and they know what the problems are. They don't always know the solutions. They don't have the resources. We don't always have them. But when you have the leadership who are willing to bring this to our attention and work with us, that's when we can really push the needle on the quality of life. We have to do this incrementally. So many times I've been asked, well, what's the master plan for, what's the great plan for changing? And I said, the plan is to let neighbors do what they know how to do best, and to work with them to help them identify and bring the resources that we can to help them solve their neighborhood problems, to improve the quality of life in their neighborhoods. As I said, it took us 40 years of population decline before we finally bottomed out, hollowed out so much of our tax base, put us in this position. It's going to be a long way out, but it can be done if we pay attention to those small things that really improve the quality of life for our citizens. We've already begun to move on this, trying to take this district, which in general runs from Freeman Avenue on the north up to Russian Hill, and from 7th Street back east over to the freeway. And we defined a district that was relatively small, about 4,100 residents, because it's easier to apply methods and to collect data and to analyze that data. And again, it's an important neighborhood for us because it is the most accessible to downtown Kansas City, Missouri. It's what most people want, where the development wants to go. When John Stevens or Doug or others meet with folks who are looking to invest in KCK, that's where they're looking. And it's as if people are ready to jump in and do some good things. We've got to give them that little boost, whatever that might be. KU Med going into the old EPA building was an important move. Getting a management agreement with Merck there is an important move. But those are things They're important, but there are others. There are a lot of businesses that are established in this neighborhood coming on that will continue to attract people. You could talk about Slaps on Central, Split Log Coffee. You can talk about Brits, Chicago's, the Meadery. There are a lot of people coming in and saying, this is where I believe, as an investor, that they believe they're going to be able to make a go of it. And we have to work with what is already happening. I don't believe we change the market. I don't think we have enough resources to actually flip the market and make it do something it doesn't want to do. We work with what is sustainable and try and bring what we need to do to help make it happen. When we began to talk about this, Administrator Bach began to talk with Chief Ziegler about just the policing approach we might take to this area. How do you become more neighborhood-centric? How to get the data from the neighbors and decide how to bring resources to bear and what way to bring resources to bear to actually solve those problems. We are microsurfacing and striping on 6th Street. We want to reconstruct alleys so that they actually serve people in their neighborhoods, which it might be just simply clearing the brush out of these alleys. We have the Police Athletic League, which is repurposing a beautiful old building right downtown, on the south side of downtown. And we've begun to engage the small businesses who are trying to move in, make sure that they don't feel like they have to jump over hoops and hurdles. There's certainly, we have requirements, things we have to do that they must do, and we'll deal with those. But we want to actually help them in that process. And so we have a new small business liaison whose sole purpose is to work with those business owners to help them bring their business into operation. Moving forward, again, this is the co-op cannot be, I think, underestimated. From the pro forma I've seen, in my opinion, it's going to outperform what is projected. Because what was not included in that pro forma were people maybe coming, that there are people who go to Lawrence still to shop at the Merc. They'll drive from Kansas City area up to Lawrence to go to the Merc. There's no reason for them to go there anymore. And so just as, for instance, the Legends changed the experience of people outside Wyandotte County, changed their experience of Wyandotte County for the positive, this kind of development downtown is going to change people's experience of downtown Kansas City, of our older neighborhoods. Just as people coming to Slaps on Central Avenue is changing people's experience of Kansas City, Kansas. You know, I've had guys tell me, these are guys I taught many years ago at Rockhurst High School who are now looking for places to buy, who've come down to Slaps, and they say, wow, I like this neighborhood. They begin to drive around. They begin to talk about, you know, maybe buying a house or getting an apartment there. That would never have been the conversation 20 years ago. But we're at that point, and so the momentum is moving, and this is an important piece, and I'm confident it's going to overperform what we expect, and that is going to be a revenue generator for the city. And as you know, when we first started talking in February about the grocery store and where it might locate, the bottom line is we knew we had to have something that would generate revenues for us, that it could not expect to be continuously, perpetually subsidized by the unified government. Because if that would happen, at some point, it would exhaust the resources of the unified government, and we would not be able to subsidize, and it would close, and that would send a worse message to the community than never trying at all. And so this agreement and this project, again, we're building, we're equipping, you know, understand that, but ultimately this will pay off just as the Hilton Garden Inn did and paid back the unified government that cost. That's what we expect this to happen. Plus, because of this, others are now looking to establish other businesses and even residential development near downtown. Moving forward, we are helping to sponsor an incremental development workshop. So anybody who knows anyone who is interested in buying houses, rehabbing houses, someone who might like to buy a fourplex or build a fourplex, those incremental, those small-scale developments, there are ways to do this and be successful at it, and we are helping to sponsor a workshop that is happening October 15th. And so anybody who happens to see this or hear this and is interested in this, please contact my office, anybody's in the UG, Administrator Bach or my office, one of your commissioners, and we will, in fact, help you with the cost. It's $190 for the cost. We'll help to pay for that, because we want locally grown, small-scale developers to be here to really drive this forward. We are going to, in a way, demonstrate what walkable, livable neighborhoods are like with what we are calling a Blocktoberfest. That's very cute, by the way. This is sponsored by and designed by Better Block. It's a, as it says, it's a community revitalization project and urban design exhibit. So there'll be pop-up shops, bike lanes, activities, and more. We are restriping the street there to show what it's like if you actually try to create a more walkable streetscape. And so I'm going to ask Catherine to come up and explain this in just a few moments. Actually, I'm going to let Catherine come up and explain these.
Thank you. Fantastic. Good afternoon, or evening rather. Catherine Carter, I'm with the Economic Development Department. Just as the mayor was explaining, this really is a revitalization tool that basically the goal is to show the public what a complete street would be like. So if we could have kind of the downtown and revitalized kind of blocks that we all kind of envision as the way we would like our city to look. So with the bike lanes, with you know, no vacant lots. Instead, you have you know, shops going up and down. If you actually go to the next slide, I think there you go. So another thing you can tell is if anyone has driven on 6th and Barnett, that is a really, I'm sure it made sense at the time that it was engineered, but it does not make sense currently for the way that that intersection works, and there's a lot of space that it goes underutilized. So we're really kind of using this, we're just doing 2 blocks and just trying to show the public what it could be like if we kind of, you know, kind of re-engineered how we see our downtown. So we're going to have a lot of local businesses from all around downtown and Central Avenue come up, and they'll be in the pop-up spaces. We'll have the farmers market. If you missed it on Wednesday, they'll be back at 6th and Taromie in that vacant lot. So really trying to activate all the space for those 2 blocks.
That is tomorrow.
Yes.
If you would also describe this a little bit.
Sure. So another thing with the grocery store development, we're anticipating, as the mayor mentioned, potential future development along that block. And so one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we don't run into a situation where we develop but we have not planned you know, enough to actually make the entire environment work for the UG, for our residents. So currently, as you can tell, we have plenty of parking, but there may come a time when you have a lot more people coming into the grocery store. You know, you may have people wanting to pay their utility bills, as well as something over at the Reardon Center. So just as a way to make sure that all those streets surrounding that block, since that's kind of our focus at the moment, really work. We're kind of narrowing those streets because right now they're pretty wide, so people go far faster than the speed limit. So narrowing those streets, making diagonal parking, so that actually will add 130 parking spaces around there. So if you hear people say that they're worried about parking, we got you covered. We'll have lots of parking. Everyone will be able to go to the grocery store and whatever future development is there, as well as kind of starting in with connecting some of the mobility bike lanes, whatnot, from that'll come kind of from Caw Point, connecting that riverfront trail system, and eventually trying to get it all the way to Central.
Thank you. So again, quality of life enhancements does improve our neighborhoods, which causes people to want to be here, want to settle here, causes them to want to invest in their own homes and their neighborhoods. That's a way forward for us to a fiscally strong and sustainable future. As a caveat, I must say, suburban development is not going to stop. We are not going to not do other developments in other parts of town. That's not the question. But we have to take a look at where we've been hollowed out over the decades and bring additional care to those neighborhoods so that we really can have a fiscally strong, sustainable future. Any comments or questions? I'd be happy to. Well, there's something going on down there, but.
We're just laughing about the delivery.
Delivery, yeah.
He's getting special service.
Oh, someone's getting special. Yes, Angie.
So my one concern in seeing this, because I'm the SOAR fan, is, we worked really hard with SOAR to bring our departments together and make sure they're all on the same page. So this, is coming out of your office. I just want to make sure that you are engaged with SOAR, because obviously you have the same goals. This is just sort of a neighborhood specifically that you're focusing on. So make sure that engagement's there, because the last thing we want is to have finally gotten everyone talking in SOAR and then to have this side project going on that isn't engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, in fact, SOAR provides a tremendous amount of structure to how we go about doing this.
And then the other thing I would say is that we are hitting several neighborhoods now between this and SOAR and the NRSA neighborhood that's related to that. But obviously there are people out there who are going to say, when is my neighborhood next? And so I think we have to think about, if we're going to set that kind of precedent, how are we going to make sure that all of our neighborhoods feel this kind of impact? Because we have enough money to support a project in a 4,100 neighborhood area, but we have a lot of people out there that aren't in that area, and they're gonna want to know, how does this impact me, and when is it my turn to get all of these special attentions? Absolutely.
Yep.
So I already know that there's something trying to get into the works in an area that I have, and but we're looking at OPM, other people's money investing, investors coming in and doing the heavy lifting, and the city just has to play fair with others for this to happen. So that's kind of the direction that I'm pushing in. I'm not asking for money from the city. I'm asking for other people, investors, to come in and help put this together. So that's where I am on this.
Okay, we have time for one more, because I don't want to displace Doug's presentation. Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate what Commissioner Markley just said and put in an early budget plug for next budget season, because I think that and Administrator Bach and I have talked about this, I'm worried that we don't have enough money in our 18 or our 19 budgets for actually keeping up with blight reduction efforts with what SOAR has already started to do. And I want to put in an early plug for the next budget that we need to put, in my opinion, more resources in countywide blight reduction. We need to put more resources in countywide code enforcement. We need to put more resources in countywide grass cutting and grass and weeds abatement and other types of abatements. And I really appreciate this, and I believe in this vision. I absolutely do. But I want to make sure that we take the programs that we have already committed to and make sure that they are fully funded for the benefit of the county in our next budget cycle.
Thank you. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor. Very good presentation. Next on the agenda is my administrative report. I'm going to ask Chief Callahan, your staff, you guys want to come on up now so you're ready when we come to the section where you report on this. So a couple of times a year, I try to go through and give an update on all the activities, and I say all, it doesn't get to all, but there are many different areas that we have staff members actively working on. They're carrying out duties that are part of the budget process. Provides for us the opportunity for it to dig in and see a little bit more of progress that's happening in each of these areas and let you all know. So this is all based on commission goals, and the report is based around the commission 6 goals that we have in place of reducing blight, increasing safety, perception of safety, increasing community health, economic prosperity, improving customer service communication, and increasing community cohesion. That's where we try to fill these in under, as well as we look at the values that are listed out there for service delivery, people-centered decision-making, and resource management for activities. So as I present them, they'll all be presented under each of these areas. Also, as I go through, I tend to highlight really only one. I mean, there's close to 70 pages in this report, so I'm not going to go through everything on every page. I would do want to provide it all to you all so you have it in front of you so you can dig into it, or members of the public can look at it and see more on each area. So in reducing blight, we have the objectives that the commission laid out here is reducing the number of structures in need of demo, the number of unsafe structures, vacant housing stock, reducing that, reducing number of tax sale eligible parcels, increasing property maintenance index ratings, improving housing choice, improving housing affordability, improving satisfaction in public infrastructure, and improving condition of public infrastructure. So there's a lot of items under here that we try to touch on.
Can we ask questions as you go along?
You may.
Okay, so if you go back to your slide, those are all really great goals. So reducing the number of structures in need of demolition. Is there a strategy with that?
Yes.
And do we know that strategy?
It's one of the core ones we've talked about a number of times with the SOAR project area. So reducing those in need of blight or in need of demolition is the main target for that. As we go after those, we acquire housing now, or we start to board them up early in the process before they get demoed. We will actually do this to houses we don't have possession of, but we can get authority to, or we gain early access to them to tax sale, and then we board those houses up to keep them from continuing to deteriorate. And then we've moved those houses over to start to sell them to contractors to come in and rebuild some of those. We've actually have 75 of those houses that are identified in that process. We've had about, it's in my report in a little bit, there's about 28 that I think have been completed. This is one that Chris Slaughter comes and reports to standing committee on, I think monthly, as to what the status is going on as far as what we're doing with contractors in regard to this.
So I understand that, but my question really is, are we doing that in the areas where we're getting the best possible return on our investment? Or are we just making more of a political decision and spreading out that demolition amongst all over Wyandotte County?
All right. Now, are you talking about what we're demolishing, or, I mean, the reducing the number of structures in need of demolition is what I...
So I think that the reduction in, of the number of structures in need of demolition is amazing, and I am 200% supportive of that. But what I'm concerned about is that I'm not sure that I've heard a strategy, and that once those structures have been demolished, are they being demolished in areas of our city where they have the greatest potential for redevelopment, and to encourage that fair market investment that commissioners like Commissioner Philbrook just talked about. So if we're demolishing structures in some of the most economically distressed areas of our community, and we clean up a block of houses, let's say, that's good, except that we all know that it is unlikely that a developer is going to come down and not ask for government incentive if we want redevelopment done in that area. So my question is, are we building on good things that are already happening and addressing the structures that are in need of demolition or repair in areas that are surrounded in areas that have already developed some momentum? Or are we just randomly putting these structures, numbering them 1 through 1,000, and starting at the top of the list and going to the bottom? Because this is the problem. The ultimate goal of all of the presentation that we were given tonight and what we'll probably hear in your presentation is that if we don't grow our community, we're going to be in big trouble financially. And I don't care. I've been up here 12 years, and I've heard this data described and laid out in about every academic way that you can possibly imagine. And we consult with people that are consultants that when I review their biographies, I've seen a lot of academic study, but I've never seen a resume from people that have offered these suggestions that have actually ever really done a project. So there are some concerns there. So I would just say that, and I won't go through every single one of these, but I just chose one. But I would hope that what we're doing is investing in areas where we're already seeing significant private fair market investment and building off of that and developing momentum and using the revenue from that development to offset the costs, the extra costs that it's going to take to redevelop those more challenging areas. And there's got to be a way to do that. I understand the TIF process, and I understand boundaries, and I understand you can't take that TIF money out of a particular area. But if you have a TIF that is outperforming, let's just say there's a TIF that's going to pay off 6 years early, and there's going to be additional TIF money in that area, and Kansas statute does not allow us to spend that additional TIF money outside of that TIF area. Creative strategic approaches might be that that money is somehow we figure out how that money is set aside for areas that have a more difficult time attracting fair market housing and fair market retail, or we're always going to be in the business of providing incentives, because never have fair market businesses come to Wyandotte County in my 12, almost 13 years on the commission and not asked for some sort of incentive.
Well, I would disagree with that. I think there are quite a few small businesses actually that have established themselves. And those are all over the county. A lot of, Overstock just moved into, along Kansas Avenue, and that did not receive any incentives. But I know we could get into a long-term discussion on this, but I think what we want to do is save that for our day of retreat, because we're going to talk about economic development strategies, I believe, during that day. I would like Administrator Bach to go ahead and finish his presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And of course, as you know, these are the definitions of going through blight as are laid out by the governing body. So how do we work into these? This one kind of speaks right into where we are with the commissioner's first comment and strategies on different things, but on the first part of the answer. So we've completed 18 home renovations, 28 are underway, 2 pending start, and 39 are being actively marketed to get somebody to come in and rebuild those. And you can see the various numbers as you go through tax sales and such like that. So there's a lot of good information that are coming out on each of these slides to go through. In going into zoning enforcement issues, just to show a little difference in comparison for violations for the activity we've done, we were 175 violation cases versus 83 last year, doubling the right-of-way sign cases, and 89 going through DRC inspections versus 5 last year. So much more active in this year of what we're doing. We've had a 277% increase in our administrative citation process. Now that increase, as you know, came across was you approved and pushed forward to do the administrative citation process, which was something new rather than going to administrative court. So that was in its first year. And then once we've got it in place, we're seeing a lot more active utilization of that to put people through that versus sending everybody to court. All initial inspections of the rental license process and the nurse area have been completed, and 61 exterior inspections were completed, and 9 properties have had full interior inspections, so a real directive effort toward this tipping point neighborhood we touched on. We had the $2 million in demolition funding, and this goes a little bit toward where Commissioner Margia was going, and I think that's kind of a mix as you look at the strategy so we have 120 structures currently on the demo list compared to 205 last year, so we've taken a big chunk off of where we're at. The emphasis goes toward probably a combination of it's better to go pull out one really bad house down a street that has other good houses on it, because that provides the opportunity to rehab and put something back in place of that, than it is when you just do full blocks, because then you have to have somebody come in and redevelop the whole area. So I think it was a good point you were making, Commissioner, that strategy to go in and pick off a few in the area gets it. Though we are moving on a track per the funding the commission put in place a year ago to try to get this list down so we don't have any backlog of houses that are deemed fully demolition. Street division with the pothole patcher coming online this year is up to 1,807 potholes. I didn't get the number of what we had previously. We're kind of tracking that at a different rate. So this kind of gives us a baseline as we start working forward with the new data we're getting there. Under the area of increased safety and the perception of safety, note the items we have. In cooperation with the district attorney's office, I'll note that our police department changed the way officer-involved shootings that result in death are investigated and reviews. The police department will bring in an outside investigators to assist with part of this investigation. So this was a good coordinated effort between the police department and the district attorney as they move forward.
Is this something we as a commission approve, or is this just something they get to decide?
That's just a process that we approve as to how we handle that.
Does the commission get to vote on that, or is that just a decision made by our chief of police?
That is a decision made by the chief along with me, and then also in coordination with the district attorney.
So it does not require commission approval?
Correct.
Thank you.
We presented a detailed update on the police tow lot project to the Public Works and Safety Standing Committee on September 17th. Within this, we noted the findings of the business plan that had an extensive review that has gone through on that. We proposed the facility layout and a timeline for that as they move forward to acquiring property now for this project. We initiated a national recruitment, conducted multiple day assessment center, and ultimately hired a new fire chief. And with that, I'm going to do a little deviation from my normal report, and I've asked Chief Callahan to come forward as our new chief that's been here a month and kind of run through his 100-day plan that he laid out for me but hadn't really laid out for everyone else, and note his progress that he's done to date. With that, Chief, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you, Administrator Bach. Good evening to everybody. So in preparation for assuming the job here, I developed a 100-day plan. I'm 32 days into that plan as of tonight. And we'll go through these, and if anyone has any questions, please ask. So I met with the command staff collectively as a group to hear their concerns and suggestions and get some feedback from them. I also met with the command staff individually to ascertain their levels of education, certification, and training. Some people don't like to talk in front of a group, and they'd rather have a private session, so I did that. I'm in the process of conducting a listening tour of every fire station on every shift to obtain the perspective from the members in the field on where they see the department currently and where they see it going forward. As you can see, it's ongoing. I'm about 45% complete with that project. I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, so that's good.
Meet with Local 64 Executive Board for their perspective on the current memorandum of understanding and potential impending MOU challenges. We've met with them, so I've got complete there, but we're still meeting with them. There's ongoing meetings. Met with the staff of the dispatch center to hear their concerns and suggestions on the way the fire department dispatches units to certain types of alarms. I'm in the process of ascertaining the capability and efficacy of the speed and weight of the department's responses, especially to the west side of the city, and I'm going to explain that because there's a couple terms of art in there. The speed of a response is the first unit to arrive on the scene, and we like to have that done in 4 minutes, according to the NFPA standard. The weight of the response is the remainder of the first alarm assignment. So speed and weight combined to complete the total alarm assignment, and that's 8 minutes for the weight of the assignment. That's ongoing. I've evaluated the condition of the department's physical facilities. That's completed. I've evaluated the condition, or I am evaluating the condition of placement and categories of the department's apparatuses. So the types of apparatus we use, how we use them, and where they're placed. I've reviewed the MOU again in preparation for upcoming negotiations. I've examined and I'm prepared to offer an opinion on the shift trading policy. That is complete. I've restructured the KCKFD organizational chart to leverage delivery of a better workflow, productivity, accountability, and efficiency, with one of the big focuses being on accountability. I'm reviewing, revising, and reissuing the department's standard operating procedures and guidelines to better safeguard the well-being of the firefighters and the residents we serve. That's ongoing. Actually, that'll always be ongoing. That will never end. I've met with Sheriff Ash, who is a great guy, and his command staff to establish and advance the relationship between the fire department and the sheriff's department. That's complete. I've met with the district attorney and his executive staff to do the same thing. Complete. I met with Chief Ziegler and his command staff to establish and advance a better working relationship between the KCKFD and the police department. Met with Chief Horn from the Unified School District for the same reason. Public safety partners operate together, and we need to do that as seamlessly as possible. Also, I've met with fire chiefs from Bonner Springs, Edwardsville, KC Mo, Tonganoxie, Overland Park, and other jurisdictions to establish and reestablish, an important word, working relationships to ensure cooperation and collaboration on auto aid, mutual aid, and NUVA protocols. Couple more terms of art. So auto aid means that when a neighboring department, when we get a call for service, an emergency call, a neighboring department who's on our border would respond just like they're part of the KCK Fire Department. Mutual aid is when we in KCK determine, or when the suburbs, or not the suburbs, I'm speaking like where I came from, the towns outside of Wyandotte County need help, we assist them, they assist us. So move-up protocols involve sending filling our fire stations with companies from other jurisdictions when we have a big event that we're responding to. I'm meeting with the fire chiefs from Leavenworth County to assure cooperation and collaboration on those same types of things. I think they can be an asset to us. I don't think they've been reached out to, so I'm meeting with them on Monday. I've attended community events like the Diversity Parade and others, so people can see my face before there's an emergency and they see my face. They should know me before that. I've initiated the process to improve our ISO rating, which helps with insurance rates. I've also initiated the process to obtain accreditation for the Center for Public Safety Excellence. That's an international organization. If we are accredited as a department, it would put the KCKFD in the top 0.5% of all fire departments. And that's pretty much all I have. Yeah, that was a slip.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
And just to move on through the increased safety and the perception of safety. Hit this next one is we completed 4 different recruit graduations this year. Sheriff's Department had 2, the police departments had 1, and fires had 1. I'll also note that we have 2 more yet to come in November. The Sheriff's Department will have another graduation along with the police department. Municipal court has been actively doing a lot of different things, but also in parking control ticket collections have doubled from up to 80,000 from where they were last year. They were about 34,589. We finalized a contract with Johnson County for a crime lab for forensic testings of evidence. That way we process this information much quicker and have it available for our investigations in a timely manner. Emergency Preparedness Division participated in a tabletop exercise to test the county's standard operating guidelines and the community's response and recovery plan for mass fatality incidents. And that's an ongoing one that they do those every year, and usually a couple. Under adult services, under community corrections, we ended fiscal year 18 with a success rate of 67% and a new offense rate of 13% for those revoked. This was the highest success rate and the lowest new offense rate of the big 3 counties in the state. Under pretrial services, we had 67 youths were supervised by house arrest and EMD in 2017, and in the first 6 months of 2018, we've had 64 that have already been served. Moving under increased community health, and you can see the different goals or targets that are laid out there. We hosted the 3rd annual Levee Fest and first ever Levee Trail 5K run on the KC Levee Trail in Armourdale. Approximately 150 residents attended that. The environmental health staff participated in the Oz Comes to Kansas children's educational event at the Ag Hall of Fame in Bonner. Just to note some numbers, which was interesting, Parkwood Pool attendees had 9,353, which was a fair amount less, as you can see, 1,700, 1,800 less than 2017. Though you can see that so many more kids use that pool than attend some of our rec centers. We had some of our programming, 509 youth attended those. Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas Human Services Department and the Council of Community Members sponsored a provider fair health fair at Pearson Community Center on May 10th for individuals with intellectual and development disabilities and their families and support teams. We're hosting weekly progress calls with KU Health in order to coordinate engagement and best outcomes for their Strawberry Hill campus as they are renovating and bringing that online. We distributed 350 farmers market vouchers to seniors in Kansas City, Kansas, Bonner Springs, and Edwardsville. Under increasing economic prosperity for all residents, several things listed here, completed work on the implementation of our priority-based budgeting, including work with departments and their peer review groups to develop priority scoring of those inventoried. So as one of the commission's directive of being able to go through this and be more efficient in our budgeting, we've had to spend a fair amount of time getting this put together. And this will put us in place to be able to bring this back for you next year, and you'll be able to see how we have everything ranked out through that priority-based budgeting. Treasury Motor Vehicle completed 14,651 new title registrations and a little over 46,000 renewals. We have approval of a management agreement for the Merck, which was just talked about a little bit ago, for our new downtown grocery store. Received 10 new buses without any direct cost to the unified government using federal grant dollars of $694,000 and KDOT toll revenue credits of $171,000. We held 6 additional Northeast Area Master Plan public discussions during this time, meetings. A big one that you all worked on, and many people out there, we had the passage of the Public Safety and Neighborhood Infrastructure Sales Tax with 61% of the vote. So put this in a point that we're able to reinvest a lot more back into our community with this money continuing over the next decade. Utility relocation work was done along Hutton Road reconstruction, scheduled to be complete by mid to late October. The roadway project has been awarded and slated to begin in spring of 2019. We have a design of a box culvert replacement project on Ohio Avenue and 38th Street. As you go down this list, it kind of, always good to pick out ones. Quiet zone, continuing to work on that. Right-of-way plans have been completed. Purchases in process, and working with Edwardsville and the railroad to coordinate these efforts. The 18th and Central intersection construction was all completed, making major changes there. We have priority traffic signals on Parallel Parkway at 24th, 27th, and 29th are awarded, and construction to begin early next year. Be completed by June of 19. Completed replacement of septic tanks at Shelter 7 and Shelter 8, and at the marine at the lake. Completed planning study of needed sanitary sewer infrastructure upgrades associated with the development near Pump Station 63 and 67. This resulted in the beginning of the Piper Creek Sewer Improvement Project, which will add 10,000 feet of gravity sewer and 12,000 feet of force main, and a new regional pump line through this area where we've been undersized. Completed construction of the Caw Point primary sludge pump replacements. In business license, good comparable information on occupational tax. So in 2018, our year-to-date collections, $2.3 million, which is almost $78,000 more than collected in 2017. 2,341 businesses at present. We have 327 of those which are showing delinquent. 691 new businesses have filed year-to-date in that group. 40% of those businesses have been identified by staff and are already operating. Additionally, in NRC, building permits issued. 2018, we've seen 4,917 permits issued. Last year, we saw 4,233. Valuation is kind of keeping track. That's a little lower in what's coming in this year than with the value of some of those that were issued out last year. For increasing customer service and communication, I will just note the UG Attorney's Office assisted, but we had probably at all departments, but attorneys usually get involved, 1,100 core requests already this year. So that's kind of a constant from that perspective of getting some type of a response, and fortunately we have our next request system to help with that. We have communication to citizens with social media, Facebook's pages, over 3,500 followers. Our UG News Source has 3,300 followers, and Nextdoor posts more than 10,000 residents in 129 different neighborhoods. Planning held bi-weekly coordination meetings with USD 500 on implementation of their $200 million bond issue, and this is an ongoing process with them. Provided back-to-school immunization outreach clinics at Clark Middle School in Bonner Springs and at Casey Kansas Community College, providing immunizations to over 100 children. In the appraiser's office, we did an informational brochures were created in both English and Spanish this year. Knowledge Department, fiber, completed the fiber connections to all Phase 1 Police Department locations. That's the headquarters, 911 Center, Midtown, West Patrol, Academy, Fleet Center, Community Policing. We are working to get South Patrol is almost hooked in. This enables us to continue to move forward with our body camera projects, which is integral. First steps in this was getting all the fiber done. So now we have, with these completions done, we're in a go point to start issuing out the RFP for the next phases of the body camera project. Additionally, under knowledge, we had Performance Innovation Division. This is one of the initiatives put forward in place shortly after I came into administration. So it's our ability to really manage projects and make us more efficient in how we go through them, and then projecting what we're going to do from an outcome perspective. And so it crosses over into many different departments. You can see 54 different projects been worked through since going back to May of last year. Sheriff's Office noted that they were down 65% in complaints. I think a lot of that is attributable to the fact that the department is wearing body-worn cameras now. In the Streets Division, small projects concrete crew began work. The team is crack sealing again with rental equipment, and we'll continue rent through 2019, and that's when we begin to purchase our own equipment. We also have a second pothole patcher on order that's scheduled to arrive here in the coming month. And we have a new striper machine that's going to come in place for 2018. Street team is also developing a new street sweeping protocol, which began in 2018. We put in place with this a new night crew, and they were able to go into areas like the industrial areas of the community. So when people are not down there, they're able to go do their focus. We're also working on a new protocol that will put planned routes in place so we can message to people in neighborhoods and have them park off the streets so we can come down and do a much more efficient job in cleaning those up. Our system-wide SCADA system, this is our computer system that alerts us about how we are with all our pumping. We did upgrades on this and final design for bidding and construction, due out by next year. Completed courthouse high-definition security cameras with monitors at security station project. The West Treasury Annex is undergoing, if you have not been in there, they're undergoing a new glass barrier in there for security purposes. And we're with limited openings as this is underway right now, so we have people directed to come downtown. We published a blog with the National League of Cities about what we're doing with our delinquent tax and such like that. So it was good to see us get some national attention from that perspective. Under community cohesion, we received a $40,000 grant to coordinate and expand with the AmeriCorps Vista program, which provided 16 volunteers into this. Held the first series of movies in the park at Heathwood, Rosedale, and Caw Point parks. Economic Development Department attended 22 community events. Community meeting held with Bonner and Edwardsville managers and city council to discuss the city or their county budget that Mayor Alvey and I and Commissioner Walters were all able to attend. Park Drive Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy, or the NERSA walking event, had over 80 volunteers from 16 unified government departments and 6 community partners. Knocked on nearly 1,400 doors and spoke to 303 residents during this time. Just to touch on a few of the values areas under that. This is just some of the communications that went out. We've had a number of on-threes through the course of this year, along with doing weekly notes every week. Attending a lot of Employee Appreciation Week just happened a couple of weeks ago. This just kind of notes in different meetings and such that happen internally with the government. As I already noted, hired a new fire chief and also a new accounting manager this year, which it's nice to only have a few people on that list versus in the first couple of years when there's a lot of different positions on there. Also under HR, I think it's important to note, since we put the Ban the Box initiative in place in 2016, we've had a total of 50 individuals that have received interviews, and 11 have been employed by the unified government through this initiative. Also, our turnover rate is 4.61 compared to 5.48 last year. And Mayor, that completes my presentation, and I know if you have questions on that, or we can move into the next segment.
Sure, if there are any questions or comments on this portion before we move into the next segment, let's bring them now. Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. And my comments are directed to, first of all, our new chief, and I want to welcome you to Wyandotte County.
Thank you.
Perhaps for those that are watching on television, you can introduce colleagues that are there with you as well.
I have Chief Letcher and Chief Stroud with me.
Great. I appreciate the 100-day report that we got. That's something that I think that is very admirable, and it looks like you've made great progress in a short amount of time here with that. One of the things that I reflect back on is the citizen survey and also the facet study, and it seems that the fire department has, from the perspective of our community, is very well received in terms of timeliness, in terms of customer service and things of that nature. One of the things that I emphasize with the prior administration and continue to want to make sure that it's being said is that we find a way to improve our diversity of our fire department and all of our public safety. But since fire department is here, I'll direct that towards you. I didn't see any of that in this 100-day report. I would like there to be some thought given to adding some measurable goals and strategies with regard to that. As you know, when you came to Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, this is a richly diverse community, richly diverse, great history, a lot of ethnic diversity throughout the entire city. And I just think that we need to have all of our departments, not just fire, but all of our departments reflect that rich diversity. And I'll say, including women as well, in terms of how we hire and promote those persons throughout this area where the great majority of our budget is allocated towards. So I just would ask that you would give real strong consideration and just know I'm going to probably come back around and ask the question again at some point in the future, that we can see that there is some real effort to putting forth some measurable, objective strategies towards those ends. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner. Just a point of information. You mentioned female firefighters. We recently partnered with KC Mo and the Girl Scouts for a project called Camp Fury. And Camp Fury is to increase female participation in fire, EMS, and law enforcement. That project's beginning, and we met 2 days ago in my office. And on the first topic, Morris and I have had several meetings, and we've met with HR to discuss exactly the topic you just brought up.
Thank you so much.
Chief, if one of your parts of your plan was evaluate the condition of the department's physical facilities, that is complete. If you had 3 adjectives to describe in general the condition of our facilities, what 3 adjectives would you use?
Small, old, and in need of repair, although that's not actually an adjective.
Okay, so you saw what we heard, so, okay. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Bach or for Chief Callahan? No, then I'll pass the baton to Commissioner Kane.
You know, 13 years I've never given presentation to the commission, to the body, to whatever. But I felt the need when this memo went out. And effective immediately, the practice of automatically filling Fire Station 8 whenever the pumper leaves the station is modified to the following. What bothers me the most is when it says on the bottom line, excess of 30 minutes. Then, after I said something about that, they issued a memo in an effort to provide further clarification and guidance for bullet number 4 in the department memo regarding the filling of Station 8, bullet point 4, when the pumper 8 is out in emergency response, the dispatch on duty will determine which company will be sent out. And there's 2 questions here. What happens, there's a shift change, there's 3 of them. What happens is there's a catastrophe somewhere else in Wyandotte County? I had a meeting, I got a complaint from a constituent. That morning I went and met with Doug Bach and Mr. Alvey. I wanted the practice stopped. We scheduled a meeting with Chief Callahan at 1, and that's the biggest, and what upset me there is the tactic was, we don't want you to see him right now, we want to talk to him before he sees you. And that's an old management move so they can coach the chief. And I'm telling you, I was upset. During the meeting, Chief Callahan did share his information, determined his decision on not covering the station, went on call. And here's some of what he said, and I wish this would have been bigger. But it says the population of territory, or Pumper 4 territory, is 10,500, and the population of the territory 8 in Piper is only 5,500. That is inaccurate. On the very bottom of it, it says the territory of Pumper, or in the middle, the territory of Pumper 4 has 89.4% greater population than the territory of Pumper 8, and I'll show you that is not true. I had a meeting with, when I was talking to Mr. Bach, what my goal was to stop what was going on, regroup, take a look at it. That didn't happen. So the mayor and I conducted a time drive from Fire Station 8 service area. Mayor, would you like to say anything about that?
Right, so after that meeting, I talked to Mr. Bach and said, after having driven that area, I understand that Pumper Station 4 is 224%, has 224% more activity, more calls than Station 8. And so I could, with that data, I could understand why you would, Chief would do that. However, when you drive it, and you try to drive and go to those farther neighborhoods like Freeman Farms and others, it's if the pumper is, or the backup is not there on the way at least, you really extend those times to backfill that area. So those were the concerns that I passed on to Commissioner Bach. I'm sorry,
Well,
Administrator Bach.
Commissioner, but I want all my commissioners to go out there by Station 8. I want you to drive the 4, the 6, and the 8 minutes, and add 30 minutes to that time frame. And if that was your family member or you, how would you feel about that?
I did that last night, Commissioner Kane, and I wouldn't feel good about it.
You know, it's often a joke. We talk about the pole barn, and that's the pole barn at 123rd Street. And you see that tanker truck? That's a 1975 tanker truck. It starts every day, it drives, but if you're going to stop it, it takes about a half a block before you can stop it. That was where they ran the horses out of for the fire station. I want you to think about that for a minute, and they've done a good job of making it a place for those guys to go, but it's still a pole barn. I'm going to talk about my personal experience. Halloween night last year, I got home from work. I didn't feel good. I told my wife, call an ambulance. My son was about 4 minutes away. He's an EMT. It took him 8 minutes to reach my house. My son had already assessed what was going on. I thought I was having a stroke. It took 6 minutes to load me. It took 18 minutes to get to KU, and add a half hour to that if I was a stroke victim. I woke up and the doctor was telling my wife, I don't know. And I thank God they got there in a timely manner. But what happens if it was another 30 minutes? I might not have been so lucky. You know, we talk about the population. And in 1996, in the Piper area, there was 5,650 people. In 2017, there's 15,980 people, an increase by 183%, not counting the school teachers and the people that work in the area. You know, if you look at that, and then they talk about Piper proper, where it, from 1990, it went up to 2000, it went up about 500 people. And the population annex in the Piper area was 29%, but I want you to go back and look at 15,980 residents. That is a huge increase, and we have a pumper or a pole barn fire station. I want you to look at the green here. The green is where all your fire stations are at, and it's all mapped out to show the 4-minute time response in each one of your areas. So there might be a couple of gaps in there, but I want you to take a really good look at that. Look at where your fire stations are at, and look how closely they are placed to where they needed to be. And now look at Piper's. The 4-minute response time. My house is not in that 4-minute response time. In fact, most houses aren't in that 4-minute response time. I want you to look and think about what the people live north of Hut or Donahue, how they feel about what's going on down in Conner Creek, down in Walcott, down everywhere else, and you add another 30 minutes to an already timed situation that we don't have time for. Where's the other one? There it is. Sorry. All right, when they add the new fire station, look at how much the gap's still out there. The fire station covers quite a bit more ground, an unbelievable amount of ground, but look at what's left. Look at how exposed we are out west. I want you to think about that. And if you remember correctly, well, we'll go to the next thing. But I want you to think about, even with the new fire station, where we're at out there. And where you're at with each one of your fire stations. And how close your fire stations are to serving the community. This is probably, this is the time frame. You know, we had a meeting last week and they showed this to us. And they said, wow, we're going to do this. They were more enthusiastic about the tow lot being $5 million, and they have a time frame for the tow lot. But here's what you won't see on there, and Mr. Box said this in front of the mayor. They, in fact, drug their feet. So the question is, if they drug their feet on this project, what other projects did they drag their feet on? Mr. Box said it. I couldn't believe it because I kept saying they're dragging their feet, they're dragging their feet. The mayor assured me they weren't dragging their feet. Mr. Box said it right in front of the mayor. So I want you all to think about that. This whole thing I've been talking about is they've been dragging their feet. And now I want you to think about something else, that it's not going to be done till 2020, which is almost 4 budgets after we voted on the first budget. That is huge. And to be misled by the administrator, which means I misled the community in telling them it's coming. And I was told that it's coming, and then when he got mad because we were arguing, he said they did drag their feet. I don't know what they did, I don't know why they did it, but they're still dragging their feet. We had a group of academians come in and do a study for us. And that group told us that we didn't need just 2 fire stations, we needed 3, including the pole barn. So no, I don't got a degree. Those guys all had degrees. Those guys told us that we needed 2 fire stations, not 1. My grandbabies will be in high school or college before we build the 3rd one. Here's station number 4, 91st and Leavenworth Road, and I absolutely don't want the community to think that they want to be underserved like we are out west. I want to fill that gap. I don't want those folks to leave that. And the staff tells us all the time, you always come up with the issues. You always come up with the complaints, come up with the fixes. The fix is put a new truck out there at Sixes. I don't have faith in this company, our staff, getting that done in 2020. I've showed you the gaps that are out there. Every year we have money that we come in and it says, you know, we always collect more than what we had coming. Well, I think we need to take some of that money, put a truck out there to close that gap until they build the fire station. Think about even when that fire station is out there, the second fire station, look at the gap. We, west of 99th Street, north of Parallel, we pay over $13 million in taxes, and we have a pole barn that saves our people's lives. And now we want to wait 30 minutes to save our people's lives. I think the practice that they did was absolutely the wrong thing to do. I think we need to corrective action now, go back to what it was until we put a truck in out at Sixes. And I'm telling you folks, when I found out they were dragging their feet, and then the group that they hired to do this, I don't know if they had the capacity to perform the function. If you hired a bigger group to do it, it would have done faster. They're going to build the convention center, a $300 million project in Missouri in almost the same time frame, and we're talking about $4 million. I want a new truck stuck out at Sixes until we get the fire station built. And I cannot believe that I have been put in a position like this, where this district is already underserved, and that staff doesn't care, that they want to go ahead and make us even more underserved. And I wanted you commissioners to know what's going on, because I don't want it to happen to you. Mayor, Mr. Bach, the administrator, I want a new truck out at Sixes. I want one as soon as possible, because I'm not sure I can rely on you guys getting that done by 2020.
Chief Callahan, would you explain the process that you went through for this directive, just for information?
So as I said earlier, I've been going around meeting with the field personnel in the fire stations. I met with the personnel in both Station 4 and Station 8. I also met with the command staff to discuss the automatic change from Pumper 4 going to fill Station 8. And then I collected a data set that indicated that an automatic change wasn't required. In the opinion of myself as a fire service professional, the automatic change, there's going to be very little noticeable difference from what it used to be in terms of an automatic change. For example, prior to my order, if Pumper 8 left quarters to go 50 yards down the road for a brush fire, Pumper 4 was dispatched out of their house to fill, leaving a tactical and strategical gap in Pumper 4's area. My current order says that if Pumper 8 is mechanically or electrically or for any other reason not in service in their quarters, they automatically get a company there. If Pumper 8 goes to the shops for service, we put a company in there. If Pumper 8 goes to headquarters for training, we put a company in there. The 30-minute misunderstanding, I'll say, is that the professional dispatchers in the dispatch center have the capability and ability to assess a situation. If in their professional opinion, Pumper 8 leaves quarters and are going to a house fire, that's going to take more than 30 minutes. They send a company out there. They don't wait until they're gone 30 minutes. Additionally, if the professional dispatchers, in their opinion, determine that Pumper 8 is going to leave quarters for a brush fire, they don't have to pull another company, another pumper out of a station to send them out there, when in fact Pumper 8 will be back in quarters before the pumper that was going to fill the station even gets there. So that was my logic.
Look at the bottom line. With pumper 8 is out of station emergency response in excess of 30 minutes. You can do all the academian stuff you want. Common sense says that we are exposed out west, and I want us covered up. The community wants us covered up. There is not a day go by when I go to the grocery store, the gas station, or something like that, somebody says, where's the fire station? I've actually had people say, I think you lied about the fire station. And had we not have drug our feet, had they had told me the truth that somebody messed up, then this might be a different situation. But being built in 2020, almost 4 budgets later, are you going to want to wait 4 budgets later for one of your projects? Think about it. We're going to have to put that pumper truck out there at some time or another. Why not now?
Chief Callahan, are there any other, because, you know, I think Commissioner Kane makes it, you know, a very strong point that when you see the territory that has to be covered, clearly you can see that. Are there any other things that are being done to make sure that we're improving the response times to the area of Piper?
Yeah, I can discuss 2 of those times. The pumper that the commissioner, or the tanker the commissioner referred to, he's right. It's really old, really old. So what we're doing is we're taking what is now a foam truck at Station 10. It's got 2 1,000-gallon tanks on it. It's almost new. Doesn't do a lot of running. We're going to replumb that and turn that into a tanker and put it in 8's house. That's part of a solution. The other part is what I discussed in my 100-day plan. On Monday, I'll be meeting with chiefs from Leavenworth County and to determine their ability to provide automatic aid into the northwest corner of Piper for us, auto aid, as I discussed earlier. So those are 2 initiatives that are ongoing now.
And of course, you can't tell how long that would take, but what would you anticipate that?
Well, for an auto aid agreement, it doesn't take long if everyone's in agreement, and I'll be meeting Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. with the chiefs from Leavenworth County, and the tanker what's now a foam rig should be being replumbed. It'll probably take 2 weeks.
What are we going to tell a family that's watching a football game that their dad has a stroke? What are we going to tell them when we knew that we didn't have the coverage out there that we should have? And that all around the rest of the community has a 4-minute response time, except it took them 8 minutes to get to my house, another 6 minutes to assess me, and the school's a little bit further than my house. There is a need for a truck at 6's so we can close the gap and not worry about how fast the fire station's getting built. We're going to have to put a pumper or some sort of fire truck out there anyway. We might as well do it now.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, Mayor. And Commissioner Kane, I really appreciate what you're bringing forward. So I'm not an expert in fire coverage. But what I am going to say is this area needs coverage, period. And what you propose may be the correct answer. I don't know that, but I'm going to ask the mayor, county administrator, and the chief to get fire coverage in this area. What you're describing is just not right. Whatever agreement we can all come to for coverage while this pumper's out on a call has to happen, and it has to happen ASAP. And if that's a truck at 6, fine. But we've got to solve this problem, and I just want to express my support for you and what you're bringing forward, and the fact that we can't let this area not be served in the same way that all our other areas are. Thank you.
So in the interest of time, for us to get back down to our 7 o'clock, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
But you're going to sit on this?
No, we heard, I think we've heard that, and I don't think we're not here to take a vote on this.
Well, I sure hope you don't drag your feet on this.
Thank you.